should be going live right now. And I think we are. So let me just refresh to see if it's reflected.
Okay, yes.
Oh, yes, I can see that notification bar. We are live. Okay, so let me go ahead and just test out and see if there's any internet hiccup. Let me just see this. And we go here. Okay. Okay, I think we got it. Okay. Oh wow, we do have some viewers already. Very
Fantastic.
very quick. Hi,
Yeah,
for those of you who just joined us, do drop a comment and say hi to us so that we know you're here. We'd love to recognize you and give you a shout out as well.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. Glad Thanks for joining us early.
Yes, that's. I really appreciate people who are on time. We're on time just to ensure that things are going well. So if you're early with us, we want to really thank you for being here. We know this is an evening. It's almost 7 p.m. Some of you here could choose to just sit back, relax, and do nothing. But you're in tune with us, meaning that you are here to learn. And we got something really good for you.
Yeah,
Right.
really excited to be here. Thanks, Jeffro, for having me.
Oh yes, same too, Laura. I am really excited, not just to have you, but to really have this session because I know this is a very important session. We're going to talk about positivity and resiliency. So we call it this coffee chat, but we're just having like our cups, very simple ones. So this is the whole casual talk with all of you. Oh, Candace is here. Can't wait.
Hello.
So shout out to Candace. Right, Kenneth is an amazing person. We'll talk more about that a little bit later, right? So let's go back to what this session is going about. We're going to be talking about positivity and resiliency, and this session is especially for leaders at work and at home, and especially this particular time, we know how important it is. And personally, I believe that communication is the key to personal and business performance. And that's basically driven by how we perceive things. And that's why we're going to be talking about the positivity part and the resilience part as well. So I'm really excited. It's 7 p.m. right now. And I have a very special guest, my friend as well, Laura, with us. For those of you who just joined us, please say hi in the comments so that we can say hi to you. And also remember to like and share this so that everyone else can actually see and benefit from this too. All right, so let's see. let's see. Okay. Anyone here? All right. Okay, all right. So meanwhile, waiting for others to come and say hi to us. Laura, just want to quickly know how have you been doing? How have you been keeping during this period of MCO?
Well, it's been in one sense, it's been quiet, right? Because you're in one space, not much change in terms of the environment that you're in. But in another sense, it's kind of, I'm calling it a virtual frenzy. There's kind of everything has moved online, and there's this sense of like so much constant activity online. There's so many Zooms, so many lives. And so it's kind of balancing that. So I think for me, it's just been finding that space to really enjoy the resources and hearing people and like resources that haven't been online before. Finally being able to access those, a lot of people bringing their content online in new ways. So that's very exciting. At the same time, it's also managing FOMO because, there's so much good stuff out there. And so it's really just making sure you're taking care of yourself, maintaining your priorities, and it's not just getting caught up in all of that activity, for the sake of activity. So I think maintaining that sense of focus and productivity, despite all the other activity that's going on, the change and adapting to that.
Oh, that's really true, especially when you mentioned about the FOMO part. I think a lot of people are sharing so much food right now that, oh man, I wish I was I could get a hand of that.
Yeah, I think someone was saying MCO stands for Master Chef Operation. So everyone has gone into food. So I think my family chat group is also like everyone's learning, everyone's baking, everyone's roasting and grilling stuff. So it's like morning, lunch, yeah, breakfast, lunch, and
Yeah.
dinner. So you're constantly like seeing all this food. But I think it's part of the culture, right? It's Malaysia. It wouldn't be Malaysia without the food. So if you can't have the food outside, you make it yourself. So it's fantastic.
Very, very true. Very true. We are all known for food all around. Okay, so we have a lot of people that are saying hi. So we have Kenneth, we have Sui who is saying hi to us. We
Hello,
also have
hi Sri.
we have Tony who's saying hi. Laura can say hi. Okay. Wow, this is a very interesting name. I actually don't know how to pronounce this, and I'm really sorry if I pronounce it wrongly. This is Gilby, I think. I hope I don't pronounce it really off. But if I do, please please just know that I'm sorry. I'm not really good at names. Uh, so we have a few people, joining us as well. Wow.
That is unique.
Very unique. Okay. So today's topic again, for those of you who missed the introduction, we're going to talk about positivity and resilience. This is very, very important because it affects the way we communicate and the way we perform at work and at home. So Laura has basically just shared a little bit. So for our audience, Laura, maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit more.
Well, so hi everyone. My name is Laura, and I'm really glad to be here and get to just meet and connect with you and share on what we're talking about tonight, which is positivity and resilience. So I'm originally from Zimbabwe. So I was born and grew up in Zimbabwe, which so lots of people don't know where that is. If you imagine the continent of Africa, South Africa is right at the bottom. Zimbabwe is right above South Africa. So we are at the southern side of Africa. So I was born there, grew up there, moved to Melbourne. So studied in Melbourne, spent several years in Melbourne before I finally moved to Malaysia. So I've been in Malaysia for over a decade now. So background-wise, primarily digital marketing is what I've been doing. I started out with Mind Valleys, was kind of my first exposure to digital marketing and this whole new world of online. And so for me, this is a very exciting season because it's like finally there's that sense of a collective push of online has been gradually picking up pace, but now everyone is coming online. And I think over the last 10 years, technology has grown robust enough to be able to support this sudden influx of people coming online. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, running digital agencies, doing digital marketing for companies, both in Malaysia, Singapore, regionally. We've worked with banks, telcos, startups, and I also enjoy working with small business owners as well, and small teams, because I think there's something about the passion that they bring to their business. It's not just a paycheck. You go, you get paid, you go home. With small business owners, it's like they're passionate about what they do, and that's how they get started. So I really do enjoy working with small business owners and larger organizations as well in digital marketing.
Wow, that's quite a journey, right? Moving from Zimbabwe, Melbourne, and now because of the digital tech that you have, you're accessing almost globally. And I understand.
Yeah, so this is the third continent I've lived. So it's the world is pretty small now.
I don't know if I've ever been to more than 2 continents. So there's a lot more for me to see out there. All right, and I know that you're also a not just a digital strategist, and into digital marketing, but you're also a speaker and also an EQ practitioner as well. Am I right?
Yeah, so it's so that's been So I think what I didn't mention earlier was growing up, my passion was always medicine and psychology. So that's actually what I initially started out studying and then took a detour into digital marketing over the last decade. And so over the last few years, what I found is combining those. Digital marketing is really a combination of that space between the technical side of things and the human side of things. So you can be a programmer, you can be very technical, you can do the engineering, or you can be like super, heart-centered people. And digital marketing kind of brings those together. And so for me, going into like EQ, becoming a certified emotional intelligence practitioner was, for me, a natural progression of all of my different passions. It's now I can do that. I can use technology to help people improve their emotional intelligence, to improve how teams work. So I love working with organizations. And again, maybe because of that sense of having lived in different cultures, just understanding, you said communication is so important and how differently people communicate and how do you bridge that. And I think emotional intelligence and just emotional well-being is a huge in terms of how we can connect, how we can collaborate, and how people can actually get the results and the success that they need in life.
Oh yes, yes, very true. And you mentioned like right now, I think the keyword that I'm constantly seeing around is emotional intelligence and emotional well-being for not just at an organization level, but also at a personal level, right? And so I'm curious to know, during this period where there's a lot of lockdown, some people call it isolation, some people even call it social distancing as such. How has it affected at business at the organization level and also at a personal level?
Yeah, so I'll start at a personal level, I think. So earlier, like I was just mentioning, right, like even the words that we are using to describe what's going on right now, like isolation, social distancing, whereas we are not actually socially distancing, we are physically distancing, but social media is still connecting us socially. So I think even how we are approaching it, so not internalizing that language that we are separated, but we are not isolated. So we are still connected, and it's only for a season, and then we will come back together. So I think as people are working from home, I know a lot of with businesses moving online but working from home, I know a lot of people have been juggling that sense of priority, because suddenly I think someone was making the distinction that it's not just working from home, you're working at home, and especially for those parents with kids, it's a completely different dynamic, because your family is used to, when you're home, that's when you can play with them, that's when you can connect with them, and now you're home 24/7, and it's a different dynamic. It's no longer I'm here to play with you and connect with you, especially if you have young kids. Like that can be very confusing for them. Homeschooling as well is one of just juggling that. I know a lot of parents are actually struggling with, making sure that their kids are, connected, they're in class, they're in the right link at the right time while also working. So I think it's a whole new season. And I think people are learning to adapt, and people are learning to work with all these different technologies that they're finding themselves faced with. And obviously schools are affected as well. I think it's just remembering that even though someone said, the school building is shut, but the teachers are very hard at work. Right now, they are actually working harder than they have before, because they not only need to prepare their content, they need to spend extra time getting it online, making sure the technology works so that students actually have a seamless experience. With that as well, it's also taking into account like inequality, the digital divide. I think someone was saying, even in places like Hong Kong, where one of the challenges that's coming up out of this season of social distancing and lockdown is a lot of the students from lower economic social backgrounds are actually struggling to keep up, because maybe they don't have a laptop at home, they don't have internet. And so there's a lot of pressure on a lot of our social institutions right now in terms of how to support all the changes. And so obviously as a workplace, as a school, as a business, those are some of the things that, kind of coming from the personal level and kind of going on a macro level, being able to manage and juggle that as a business owner, as a manager, if you're managing a team, and being aware of all these changes that are going on. If you're a school, bringing all your content online. So I can see there's definitely a lot of changes, a lot of adaptation, a lot of knock-on effects that we often don't think about, because sometimes you're just home, you're like, okay, it's just me and my laptop, I need to do my work. But I think looking at it from a global perspective, it's actually amazing to see how people are responding and just adapting to everything that's going on around them in this season.
Wow. That's really a lot of things, right? You mentioned about change and adapting, and I think quite a fair bit of people are still finding that balance on how do I adapt better, and especially like in Malaysia, the case we are 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks of extending. It does take a toll on the psyche as well for
Yes.
us. So knowing that you're connected with different people across the globe. And I think you're also involved with some conferences and catch up with others as well. How different are people, taking it from different parts of the world as compared to what you observe here?
So I'll start with some of the more random observations. So obviously, one of the unique things about Malaysian culture is how central food is to the culture. And so the fact that in Malaysia, restaurants can still operate, that they are an essential business, I think that's actually quite unique. I know there's a lot of places in the world, so even New Zealand, where you can't even do takeaway food. I think that would probably cause riots.
Oh my God, no food.
You can't get your food. Yeah, so I think just on a cultural level, some of those kinds of changes in terms of changes in lifestyle. One unique thing that's happening in South Africa is, I think, with the alcohol ban. So there's a lot of communities that are very dependent on substances, and so that's actually been causing, like, people are starting to break into liquor stores and stuff like that. So it's just the cultural nuances that are happening across different places are interesting. So business-wise, so obviously in Malaysia, there are a lot of challenges for SMEs. So I think it was about a week ago, Google Malaysia actually did a survey of small business owners in Malaysia. And so naturally, the biggest challenge was earning enough to keep their business going, is the biggest challenge faced by SMEs. And also, second to that was changing their business model to offer new products and services. So those were some of the biggest changes. And so they're actually looking for knowledge and resources to bring their business online. So, and with that, I think there's really an opportunity for people who can come up with solutions to help businesses make that transition to change their business model and or bring their business online. I think the biggest, I think one of the key things is it's not going to be the same after this, especially as we're looking at even globally, it takes, a habit takes anywhere from like 21 to 90 days to form. And now in Malaysia, we are at day 40, of the MCO. And so a lot of habits will actually be changing. And that means consumer habits will be changing over time. So I think there will be a bit of I guess people wanting to make up for lost time when eventually when the MCO is lifted. But I think that it will be a slow process because the consumer habits are changing. A lot of the retail, I think, will be down. What I also see is, I think with commercial property, I think we have a lot of commercial property that was kind of already in excess in Malaysia. And I see, like, as people start working online a lot more, a lot of people start working from home, I think we'll actually have a lot more underutilized commercial space. And I think that's not just in Malaysia, but across the world, in different places where, as those kinds of habits change, as retail even goes online as well, people are now used to the convenience of having something delivered to them. So that's also going to change a lot of the habits that people have, just getting used to. It's no longer I have to go out of my way to get that. And I think that's something businesses and leaders need to be aware of going forward. So Another interesting thing that's been happening is with AI. So again, I'm really fascinated by technology, and so I've always been following like the trends in AI and data. And so with COVID, that's kind of thrown a spanner in the works because artificial intelligence is very reliant on the data that you feed it. And now with COVID, like with all of these changes in consumer habits, a lot of the historical data that you have might no longer be relevant. So I think it's even how do you pivot? And I think a lot of the countries now are looking at how do we adapt. A lot of industries are looking at real-time data in order to say we can't rely on the way things used to be anymore. How do we actually adapt based on the new data, the new changes, and those new consumer trends that will be coming forward. So yeah, I think it will really be a fascinating season over the next 2-3 years. I think a lot of new technologies and a new way of doing things will come out of this season. I think it will actually be a better way as people optimize, as people streamline, as people, I think, really examine what's value, right? Because when you're at home, you realize how much you need or how much you don't need. A friend of mine was saying, her wallet is thanking her for, staying home over the last few weeks. And so just imagine like all of those changes, I think are things that we need to keep in mind that, there is a new normal that we need to prepare ourselves for as leaders, whether it's in the workplace, in your organization, or even in your home, and just being aware of those changes as they happen.
Wow. Oh, that's a lot of insights, right? And clearly I can tell your passion towards technology. That's just so much energy coming from you. I'm feeling it over here as well. And that's what I find very interesting about the availability of the technology that we have. And for those of you here, you're not aware, before we came online, I was actually just asking Laura, and how things would have been so different if it's like 10 years ago compared to right now. The things that really connect us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know when I first moved to Malaysia, yeah, like over 10 years ago, I still had to buy the international calling card to communicate with my family and friends overseas. So it would be very different living in that world. This was like pre-WhatsApp. Facebook wasn't as commonplace as it is now, not as widespread. So I think we are very blessed to be able to stay connected. So even though, you're in your home, I'm in mine, but, we are connected with all the people that are tuning in live from all around the world, really. So it's quite amazing to see how technology has progressed and where we are now and just what it can do. I think there's just whole sense of continuing progressiveness of technology just over time. And it keeps getting better, right? So
yeah, I think we had a disruption of internet just a moment ago. And for those of us who are viewing here, I humbly apologize. The internet would have gotten a little bit wacky. And I think right now we're back online. And before we continue, I think we have Christine Yu saying hello as well.
Hello.
Christine Yu seems to be very familiar. Related to you?
Yes, so that's my sister-in-law. Hi, Christine. Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
And for the rest of you, especially for those of you who have just joined us, do say hi. We would love to really just give a shout out to you. And we welcome you to our session. We're going to talk about positivity and resilience. It's something that we find really, really important today. We've shared a little bit on insight about the bigger part, and after this, we're going to really dive down into a little bit more personal level. And earlier we were talking about just a very quick thing that we're talking about habits, right? What are the new things that's happening? I have a little bit mix of things, and people are saying that I'm spending more. People are saying that they're either spending more, or some people are saying they're spending less. So for those of you here live with us now, can you tell me, in the comments, are you spending more or are you spending less? Just tell us that so that we get to know what's really happening. Are you even aware about your habits right now? it's a great time to find out.
Yeah,
We
I
have
imagine retail therapy is still
Is
going
still a big thing.
strong.
Hugging all the toilet papers.
Yes, that is one of the odd trends that's happening right now.
Yeah, and we have Valerie, you as well. Wow.
Like, yeah, I have the clan.
Kenneth saying spending more on food, nothing on anything else. Oh, I think that's very true. I think I spend a lot more on like Grab and buying a lot more to stock up just to ensure that
Yes.
I have varieties of things to eat.
Yes, and then you're also buying like, especially if you're starting to cook for the first time, then you have to buy everything from scratch. So that kind of increases because now you're like, oh, I need this new ingredient to experiment with this recipe. So I imagine that does increase the budget.
Yeah, that's very true. I know as much as we talk about like MCO Master Chef online, or or the beginning of this. What I also realize is I mean, just to sidetrack a little, what I realize is whatever that we see on TV or what we see on the internet about the cooking thing, they paint a really good picture. However, when we start
Yes.
getting into doing things, oh no, I don't have this. I don't even have the ingredient that parsley that they're talking about. Nothing like that.
Yes, and I think it's also editing, video editing, strategic editing of all the time that you spend chopping up things to prepare.
Oh, very true. And the reason why I bring this up as well, because it just reminds me, in terms of perception, how things are really in reality versus how we perceive things, and that really changes our psychology as well. And that's where we're going to go deep dive into a little bit more on the personal level when we look at things, and this really affects positivity and also our resilience. So we talk about just now organization before and after. Now at a personal level, Laura, could you tell us like it there are people who are looking at being resilient and positive. Before we go into that, could you even elaborate a little bit more for us? What does resilience really mean? Because for a lot of people that I know, they look at it, yes, it's a very fancy word, but they really don't know what it means. So perhaps you could share a little bit insight on what that means.
Yeah, so I find resilience, like you said, it's a little bit of a buzzword, and you use it, but sometimes you don't know what exactly it is you're describing. But for me, I think resilience is almost like that. I get knocked down, but I get up again. Can't nobody keep me down. So I think that's really the essence of resilience: is how do you manage when things are unpredictable, when things are changing, when you're faced with difficult situations. So it's not necessarily that they don't affect you, but it's also how do you respond, and how do you come back from it? How do you learn from it? How do you adapt? And I think a lot of it is just the ability to survive and thrive. So I think when something like this happens, you need to get to, you need to survive, you need to hold on, you need to hang in there. But after that, for me, resilience is about what happens after that. So what happens during that survival mode determines how well you thrive after that. And so again, that's where the perception comes in, that sense of hope, that sense of tenacity, that inner strength to understand that whatever's going on around you, you will make it to the other side. So for me, that's really the core of resilience, is that inner strength to keep holding on even when you're faced with things that may even seem beyond you, but you're able to keep holding on and keep hanging in there and come back stronger.
And there are people who were already struggling even before this entire MCO happened, trying to keep up with workload and maybe some things that are happening in their lives. And now with this entire quarantine period, this lockdown and physical distancing itself, how different would it be for a person? And what are the things that someone in that position could actually do to let's not talk about thrive yet. Let's just talk about just barely surviving it.
Yeah. So again, it comes down to how we perceive and how we approach situations, right? Which is what we're talking about. And so I think we can look to science as well at this point, that we used to think that the brain stopped growing when initially they were like, oh, you're late teens, your brain is fixed. And then they're like, oh, actually into your 20s, your brain stops changing and growing. But we found that like with neuroplasticity, like you can constantly rewire your brain. So you actually have, in a sense, the power to change how you think, how you live. And a lot of that is, what you focus on. So for me, I think some of the practical things that people can do is just being very conscious of what they're exposing themselves to. Especially, like you said, if you're already struggling, it doesn't make sense to then keep feeding your fear until it actually consumes you. So even like with the news, how much of the news are you focusing on? Because it can be different versions of the same bad news. So what can you do to switch the environment that you're immersing yourself in? So a lot of it, I know, especially with the mind, it's about switching what you're focusing on. So things like mindfulness. One of my go-to apps is called Stop, Think, and Breathe. So it's actually a free app that you can get on. Yeah, so in a sense, the name, it's fairly self-descriptive. But I think so if you're already struggling, I think it helps to have kind of some of these practices that you begin to put in place so that you learn to stop those racing thoughts, that anxiety, the fear that can actually be overwhelming. So actually learning to take control of your own mind, your own brain, and actually making your brain your friend, I think is one of the key things at this point. So how do you befriend your brain? How do you feed it things that your brain will thank you in future, and you can actually partner with your mind so that you're both heading in the same direction? I know sometimes it can feel like you want one thing, but your brain's racing and you're thinking of other things, or you're freaking out, but you're like, I want to be strong. And I think part of that is just learning how to focus, learning how to direct your mind, and really, like I said, taking advantage of the fact that you have the power to shape your future. Again, a lot of resources available right now in terms of just learning new skills, immersing yourself, distracting yourself, so that you are not just fixated on the negatives that are happening, but you're actually leveraging on a lot of the skills and the tools that are being made available right now. Even if you don't have the money to pay for them, you can actually get them for free at the moment.
Interesting. And I want to sort of go a little bit deeper in terms of what you mentioned earlier. A very interesting thing is that make your brain your friend and feed your brain the positivity, right? So what are some of the practical or actionable items for someone else to start feeding themselves with positivity? What are the things that someone can actually start doing differently?
I think part of it is recognizing where you are right now. So I think just acknowledging and accepting, because sometimes we think being positive is denying where we are or what we're feeling right now. But I think it really starts with just acknowledging, okay, this is how I'm feeling. And then from there, you can begin to take inventory of what can I do? What can I change? So sometimes with perceptions as well, you find that sometimes what you're thinking isn't always the reality. It isn't always the truth in that sense. So actually, so things like journaling can really help. So just getting everything just from, that swirl of thoughts in your own mind, and just getting it down on paper. And then you can be a little bit more objective in terms of assessing, okay, this is how I'm feeling. You get to process a lot of that emotion. And so once you recognize that, once you're writing it down, I find that in a sense, learning how to speak to yourself as well. So rather than telling yourself how terrible things are, so find things that are specific to you. What are some of the negative things that you tell yourself, and actually start find a way to reframe that, to start speaking it a little bit more positively. So, maybe if you're, I'll never get out of this, I don't know how I can make it, to, switch that to I have the capacity to make it through this. I will,
Right.
I will come out of this stronger than ever before. So, but it needs to be something that you come up with that is true and that can resonate with you. And I think that's why it's important to, like I said, especially with journaling, with mindfulness, recognizing where you are so that you can come up with, because in a sense, your personal and emotional space, no one else can take responsibility for that. That's your role, in a sense. If you neglect that, no one else is going to come and be like, I want to take care of you. So for me, it's really about how do you take ownership of that, and in a sense draw a line in the sand and decide, okay, this is how I'm feeling, but where do I want to go? So casting that longer term vision and having that sense of where your life is heading. I think one of the other things as well is just that sense of recognizing that a lot of times people tie their identity to their work. And so for me, so one of the things I talk about is the 6 life orbits. So it's like the different areas of your life that actually contribute to being healthy and holistic, and actually being successful and getting the results you want. So your work is just one of those areas, investing in yourself emotionally. So like I said, doing some of those exercises, investing in relationships, investing in your intellectual growth, investing physically, your exercise, spirituality, finding meaning. So there are all these different aspects of life, but sometimes in the middle of, let's say, this MCO, like you said, if you're already struggling, your mind becomes very fixated on just this one area of life where maybe things aren't going well. And I think expanding that bigger picture of my life is bigger than this area. So this area might not be doing well, but what can I do in some of these other areas? And taking back that control and taking back your personal power to recognize that, yeah, your life is yours. If one area isn't working well, you can work on some of the other areas and you can get out of that stronger. So working on all those different areas can help you become a lot more creative. It can give you that energy to come back to that area. And now you might be able to think of new solutions, new ideas on how you can actually respond and adapt in that area, rather than when you're fixated on that one thing, it's like you can't see anything else. So sometimes just taking that break and, like I said, looking at the bigger picture can really help.
Yeah, yeah, wow, that's a lot, and I hope our audience here are getting it. This is a lot of things that you can actually start doing as well. Anywhere from recognizing to accepting it, and also starting. I think what's very interesting is that you mentioned journaling as well, writing down what you feel so that you're aware of it, and then you can know what to do about it. And of course, it's also what you tell yourself most of the time, because I don't know whether our audience here are aware, but I do sometimes hear myself telling me something, and that could be either destructive or that could be elevating, right? So it's really important to know what you're saying as well. Strangely, we have someone in the audience who is actually saying, "I heard you had a fridge to sell." Is that what you get from this sharing? I clearly didn't hear fridge, but that's a very interesting observation.
Maybe it's all the talk about food.
All right,
Feeding
Shaggy.
your brain. So it's like, oh, so maybe it's, having the idea of a mental fridge. So, yeah, I mean, that could work. Like what's in your mental fridge? Like, what are you feeding your brain? Like when you're going and opening the fridge and looking, is it full of junk food, or, are you getting rid of the junk food and feeding your brain on things that are actually good for you?
True. And actually, talking about like what you're feeding yourself, I realized one thing. Right now, all of us here are so much on screen, whether it's phone, laptops, TV, or anything that just shows us visual. In short, social media. How do you think that has been, playing a part in our mind frame, towards being positive or towards being resilient?
Yeah, so I think social media is absolutely powerful. Again, just that sense of being able to stay connected to people at this point. I think, and with a lot of the communities moving online as well. So I love how, geographic or travel restrictions are no longer, in a sense, no longer relevant. It's really, the click of a button away to get connected, learn something, meet new people, and all of that. At the same time, like it is a double-edged sword, because these companies have spent a lot of time. They've hired, psychologists to design their platforms to be addictive. And so I think with that, it's finding that balance. Earlier, we were talking about FOMO, right? Like really learning to prioritize how much time you're spending online, even potentially doing, digital detox. So one of the things that I find very helpful, especially as if you're starting to work at home for the first time, really having clear boundaries on your use of technology and staying connected. So having a hard cutoff time. So let's say 10 p.m., 11 p.m. So I actually know people who at 11 p.m. their router switches off. It's on a timer, so you can't even get online and all that. So it's doing whatever works for you, so that you're actually not just staring at that screen. And again, it does rewire the brain, and just that sense of, it taps into the chemicals, the dopamines, the feel good chemicals. And so I think it's important to just really guard your mental space. It's easy to just find yourself working at all hours, especially, like I said, when you're balancing all these other things going on. You can lose track of time when just staring in front of the screen, like there's no change in environment. So I think it's important to really have those boundaries when you're working at home.
Right. Yeah. Creating a control, and then and committing to the control, not just creating it and then letting people know, what, I'm going to turn off. And then after that, silently taking it and then click. Yeah,
you sound like you have personal experience, Jeffro.
I think I have a little bit of problem with that, especially on the phone.
Yeah, I think it's true for everyone, right? Like, yeah, it is, like, again, especially now that it is our kind of social lifeline, social media. So I can imagine, like, I myself sometimes struggle with that, and I have to be very intentional about. So even things like meal times, making sure I'm not just checking my phone, actually putting it aside. And I think for families as well, especially just making sure. Even like managing that for kids. We know that technology is actually rewiring the brains of kids at this point when they're exposed too much to technology. So understandably, right now, it can be hard to set aside the time to interact, play with them. But I think it's really finding other ways to not just be stuck in front of a screen, but really to, just focus on communicating with the people around you. And yeah, unfortunately, sometimes that means staring at a screen. But I think that will be only for a season. Until things change.
And we want to come back again to one point that Laura has mentioned, perception. If you haven't realized, Laura actually mentioned this as a season. It's like a movie, season 1, season 2. And this is just one season that for some people, it may not be the best. But, once this season is over, the second season, it could be even better. Right? Okay, so we talk about
with that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
Well, we talk about positivity and a lot of points that you've mentioned that people can start doing right now. Again, I just want to recap, recognizing where you are, journalizing it, and slowly setting up controls. And if one thing doesn't work, walk away, sort of do something else that work, and bring that energy back to this so that you can sort of like a jump start it again, right? Now, positivity aside, now we talk about like resilience, and how does someone really get back into building a resilience, especially in tough times like this, where, like you mentioned, you have to be juggling work. Sometimes you got to juggle a relationship at home, and for those people who live either with kids and with in-laws, they also have to juggle that. So they're pretty much beaten from just about everywhere. So in terms of like resilience, how does someone get a head start in this?
So I would say one of the things is knowing your capacity, and then being able to draw boundaries in terms of what you're willing to do at this point and what you're able to do. So again, coming down to this idea of prioritizing, right? Like especially at this point, you're looking at work-life balance. Like what is work-life balance? It's really the end result of priorities. And so for some people, like they choose at the beginning, I will invest the time into my work. Like that's my primary priority. And I think a lot of the time it's the challenge, I think, with resilience is being honest with yourself about what your priorities are, and not beating yourself up when you realize what they are. So some people feel guilty about, work is my priority, and then they beat themselves up. So some people feel guilty, like, my priority is taking care of my kids right now. So that doesn't mean you neglect all the other things, but it's really recognizing what are the things that are most important to you, and just having that inner alignment, I think, is one of the first keys towards being resilient, because then, in a sense, you actually strengthen your own pillars, your own inner pillars that kind of build up your life, and then you know what you're focusing on. So I know with some of the moms, it's, you delay, cleaning your house, for example, so that you spend time with your kids, if that's your priority. But some moms are like, no, my house must be clean, and so it's different for different people. But I think that just learning who you are, and then living out from your values, and what's important to you, and communicating that to the people around you, I think, and then learning to do that is a key component of being resilient, prioritizing, and then just working through letting go of the things that maybe other people have kind of restricted or defined for you as well, will probably be a key in that. So learning to define what your life means to you, and not having it dictated by other people. Everything you do is a choice. Whether you choose to work, you choose to focus on your family, you choose to eat healthy or not to eat healthy. And I think part of resilience is really just understanding the choice is in your hands, and with great power comes great responsibility. So, and I think owning that power is the first key to tapping into that resilience, especially in this season.
Wow, that is so powerful. And because you mentioned about communicating to others, now most of people, if they're working, of course they can communicate with people at home, but they may also have this particular pressure that's coming from their teammates or team leaders or even their staff members. And how do you suggest, or how do you recommend them to communicate this via virtually? Because it's a little bit different, right? Communicating face to face, and now virtually. I want to say that. Yeah. So what are some things that you could actually suggest to people who wants to communicate this, like priorities and boundaries or values to other people, so that they know what's happening as well?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing, like, every business needs to survive. Like, that's the primary priority for a business at this point. So I'm not saying, tell your boss, I'm not going to work because I have other priorities, because that is not going to fly. But what I am saying is find ways to make it work where you are. So whether that's just reworking your schedule, if there's things that you can do, maybe early mornings, start working out, you start, and then you find ways to rework your schedule. Maybe it's even, setting like, okay, within these times, can we keep our meetings, during the day? I know a lot of meetings are now happening like 8 p.m., 9 p.m., a lot of that. So maybe even just communicating and finding like that middle ground with your leaders. And I think as leaders as well, being aware that people are human. And so I know a lot of, so obviously it's slightly different when you're an SME, because in a sense you're focused right now on how do I optimize, how do I streamline, but it's not about becoming, a taskmaster and being heartless with your staff. But it is looking at, things have changed. How do we stay productive in the midst of that? And I think a lot of that is really looking at schedules, and helping your team to say, okay, really coming down to what are the key things that needs to get done, prioritize those. I find with sometimes as businesses, there's a lot of kind of extra things that we work on, and we don't actually key in on what are the key drivers of our business. So I think getting clear on that, and then making sure is everyone focused on that? And then all the priorities come behind that, and then removing maybe any extra things that can be done later, again, within understanding that right now there is a limited amount of time.
Yeah, well, that's actually a very good thing, right? We don't tell the leaders, you know what, I can't do this. I gotta take care of my daughter or my pet, and then boss will like work. And
yeah, so,
okay,
so I think there's wisdom in there as well.
Definitely. And I want to ask on behalf of some leaders as well. And the reason why I'm going to ask this particular question is because speaking to some of my friends, they realize that in the midst of telling people, let's be positive, sometimes it can be counterintuitive. Like you're going into a meeting and say, you know what, guys, let's all be positive. And everyone has that knee-jerk reaction. Oh man, he's gonna say that again. So instead of just saying let's be positive, what would you suggest for a team leader or someone who's trying to influence the team to be on a positive side without saying let's be positive? What would you suggest other ways of approaching it?
So again, I think one of the key things is doing that virtually. A lot of it is about you can't, look over someone's shoulder, virtually anymore, because a lot of management and leadership tends to be, I see you, I come, I hover over your shoulder, I know what you're doing. And then, from there I can be like, hang in there, keep doing it. So I think with online, it's really about developing connection. So I think really having conversations with actually finding out where your team is at, so you actually understand what's their situation. So making sure can they commit to whatever it is that you're doing, and how can you work together towards that. It comes down to a lot of it is just creating an environment that is positive. So it's not just, you can't just tell someone to be positive if it's not being lived out in the values of the organization. So I think a lot of that is creating that environment, creating, I think, spaces where people can ask for support. So how can maybe if they need someone to brainstorm together, if they need to collaborate on certain things, so that people don't feel like I'm going through this on my own. I think a lot of that comes down to, as a leader, how well you communicate.
Yeah. Well, Kenneth has a very good wisdom here. Let's be brutally honest. There's nothing much that can kill you. Bite the bullet and resurrect like a phoenix. Wow. Kenneth in the house. Wow,
Yeah,
great.
and I think that's actually how business owners are surviving right now. I think they really are, like, it's a do or die situation at this point. So as a business owner, it's a lot of what you're doing right now is how do I keep my team on productive on my side, so that we can actually get through this, because the last thing you want is people to be falling apart and having emotional breakdowns while in the midst of all of this. Like, you have enough on your hands. So if you can create that environment where your team stays productive, it can minimize a lot of other drama and issues.
True. Well, and that's definitely right. Creating an environment is so important, and not just creating environment for people virtually. You also have to create that exact same environment at home, because whatever affects you at home affects people on the outside as well. I mean, you're just a channel towards it, right? Am I saying that right, Laura?
Yes, and especially now, again, like that line between home and work, I think people, again, are realizing that, we are integrated human beings. It's easy to compartmentalize, and, you do need structure. But at the end of the day, you are one integrated human. And so it's how do you live and work holistically within that context? And so if you're handling things well, then in a sense, the environment around you will be good. But when, like you said, when when your internal environment isn't good, it affects everyone around you, for sure.
For sure. I agree. Okay, so let's see from our audience, our friends who are online. For those of you here who just joined us, and if you only heard partially, don't worry. It's gonna be up, and you can just rewatch and then ask us questions. And for those of you who are here for since the start, thank you so much. What are some questions that you have, for Laura in terms of positivity and resilience? What are some things that you want Laura to share more with you? Put your comments there, and we'll read it out. Oh, very quickly, Suyi has already asked, what about people who lost their jobs? How do you tell them to stay positive? Oh, wow, such very profound question.
Yeah. I think that's a really good question, and that comes down to reality, right? Because there are a number of people who have lost their jobs either as a result of this MCO, or even prior to this, they already didn't have a job. And I think the key is not just telling them, be positive, although that's part of it. I would say it's kind of having an attitude of how can you not stay where you are, especially if you're feeling down? How can you invest in the future that you want? Things might not be good right now, but what are some steps you can do to invest in the future? So switching that mind space. So I'd say things like a lot of networking online, so actually developing those relationships. A lot of people are, like I said, now available to actually connect online, joining communities where people can actually help you. I know, I think it was last week, I was actually on a call with a group of leaders, both business owners and employees, and some of them were sharing, okay, this is the situation I'm in. How do I navigate this? So I think it's, I would say, like the two of the key things that you kind of need to work around is pride and paralysis. So I would say those are two enemies of being productive when you're in that difficult situation. So sometimes pride is, I don't want people to know what I'm going through. And so you don't actually reach out and get the advice that you need to help you. And paralysis as well, like stops you from actually reaching out. So I think if you can kind of address that and then reach out, I think right now, finding the communities where people can actually give you advice and help you to navigate this season. I know there are companies are hiring. There are opportunities out there. So it's about how you position yourself as well, where rather than sitting back and saying things are terrible right now, like I said, it's how do you focus on the future that you want and not stay where you are.
Well, I hope, Sui, that answers your question. Are there any other questions from the audience as well? Do put it into the comments. We'll read it out. I do still see a few people who are talking about fridges. I don't know where the fridge comes into place, but clearly someone is hungry. And someone here named Julius is saying, I guess the time to take stock when one loses a job is to look at our social capital. Oh, okay. What are your thoughts about that, Laura?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that ties in with what I was saying, just looking at the people around you and really leveraging that. So even if maybe you don't directly have the connections that you need, but really that social capital, those connections, those relationships, learning to tap into that, because you don't know where it will lead. So someone might know someone who knows someone. And so, yeah, like you said, this is a really great time, especially when you don't have a job, just to really focus on connecting and putting yourself out there and positioning yourself in the right place so that when the opportunity comes, you're actually ready to take hold of it.
Right. And I fully agree. Just to expand on that, you may lose a job, but you still have your skills, you still have your knowledge, you still have a life. The thing is, again, we talk about perception. You can think of either you're at loss or you have a chance to go out and try something different. And putting yourself out, like what Laura say, reach out to people. And truly, if you have the value, I think people will snatch you up, right? And there's so many platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn, everywhere else. And that's exactly what you could start doing as well, right? And earlier when I was talking to Laura, Laura mentioned that she has something for those who are actually in corporates and in teams, something to do an assessment. I think if I recall correctly, you mentioned about an emotional climate index. Maybe you want to share a little bit on what that is?
Yeah, so the Emotional Climate Index is actually a tool or an assessment that you can run within your team. And so Genos, the company that I'm certified with in emotional intelligence, is giving this tool. So it's worth about 2,500. But for this season, if you connect with me on Facebook or LinkedIn, you can actually get this tool for free. So it's actually a tool that helps you to get an idea of how are people feeling across your organization. So the emotional climate index. So you can measure how productive people are feeling, how anxious people are feeling, how empowered they're feeling. And that can actually help you, like I said, as a leader to engage and to understand. Earlier, you were saying, just telling your people, be positive. Like how do you know whether you're being effective? I think the Emotional Climate Index can actually help you to assess where your team is at. So that's actually a free tool that's available for teams and for organizations to take advantage of at this point.
Right, and it's great because if you want to know whether you're putting into practice, like what you mentioned, and you want to see how do you measure this would be a great tool to assess. So you can actually reach out to Laura. Let me just put it up for all of you here. So it's the Emotional Climate Index. It's a free assessment. You can reach out to Laura on Facebook or LinkedIn after this, and then you can get connected with her. But just want to have a quick check, for those of you here with us, how many of you here would love to know more about this emotional intelligence and how you can assess them, get access to this free assessment? If yes, just type in the comments, say yes. And then, if we could actually reach out to you, or we can get connected first just to understand a little bit better as well. So do type in the comments yes if you're keen and you want to know more about this, and we'll get connected with you, right? Are there any more questions, regarding this? We are already almost passing the 1 hour mark. Wow. Very long, very long. We're almost passing the 1 hour mark. It's a little bit off, and I'm sure Laura has something on after this. So don't want to hold her back. Any other questions that our audience may have that we can answer? Just one or two last ones. Otherwise, we would be closing in already. Okay, so let's just see. Don't have, just bring it on. Don't worry. All the questions, we'll take it in as well. And again, for those of you here, you've been watching it. If you find there's a lot of value here, please just give it a like, share it out so that other people can benefit. We've shared so much from an organization level to a personal level as well. And the best thing is right now that Laura has a free assessment. So for those of you who are running a business, you're working with team, and you've been trying out different things and you want to know whether it works, Laura can help you with that. Right. And just a token of appreciation for those of you who are here, I also have a ebook that I've launched very recently. I'm talking about communications. So I'm laughing because I saw one particular question. I don't know how you're gonna answer this. Candace, am I handsome? So I'm gonna leave that comment.
Oh, let me think about that.
Oh, Candace is a very funny guy. A
Yes,
very
dear.
good friend. Very funny as well. So as I was saying, I newly launched a ebook, and we're talking about communications. It's to really help boost your team spirit and really help you connect. What are the phrases that you can use? If you're interested in getting a copy of that, just type boost in the comments, and I will be able to reach out to you, and I'll send you a copy as well. Now it's super powerful because we want positivity and we want resilience. What other things can you say? So that book itself outlines 14 things that you can immediately use, and you can see a difference. And of course, if you need help in applying them, reach out to me, and I will definitely help you work on that as well. So yes, I don't see any other question coming in. So Laura, we're towards the end of the segment. Are there any last word of advice that you have to sort of encourage our audience here?
Well, I think the key thing is, I think just understanding just how resilient humans are. I think humanity has survived a lot, and even though this might this season might seem overwhelming. It might seem like there's a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of change. But I believe that when we come out on the other side, like things will be better. I think it's letting go of the attachment to the past, and actually looking forward. And I think that's what positivity is about. It's that hope and that perspective of the future will be better. And just looking at human history, that is the case. Like things have gotten better over time. And so just hang in there and you will actually get to see that better future, however difficult this season may be.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for your time. And I know you haven't had your dinner yet, so I better let you go and have your dinner. Otherwise, Kenneth will then come up with another comment. Guess who's hungry right now? All right. So thank you so much, Laura, for sharing so much insights with us. And again, for those of you here who like to get connected with Laura and especially get your hands on that free assessment for the emotional state, please reach out to Laura on Facebook or LinkedIn. If you're not sure how to, always put in a comment. I'll guide you through. And again, I also have that ebook for the 14 powerful phrases that you can use at workplace and at home. And if you'd like to get a copy, just type "boost" and we'll reach out to you. Right? Kenneth say already eaten. Oops, someone ate. All right. So that's all we have.
Thank you, Jeffro.
That's all we have. And thank you, Laura. You're absolutely welcome. And I hope that everyone found this session really beneficial. Again, give it a like, share it with your friends, tag your friends in so that they know this as well. And until then, we're gonna sign off. We're gonna go and get some food, and we'll catch you again next time. Right. All right. Thank you, Laura. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.